Thank you for a very nice and detailed introduction of myself. So you can see my voice was hoarse, so I try to, speak as precise as possible and leave more time for sharing among the audience. And today is the third workshop of this series on evidence-based practice. We have touched upon before Christmas the conceptual framework of evidence-based practice, and then we also talk about translating research evidence into practice. And today we're going to talk about the interdisciplinary research in evidence-based practice and how to form research clusters and research centers. So there are different types of collaboration among different disciplines. If we look at, if we arrange them in the issue of, dimension of not integrated different disciplines to highly integrated with different disciplines, then we can start with a single discipline research. That means experts from one field, for example, social work or psychology, and work on their discipline framework and then conduct the research. And then the next level is a little bit more integrated. Is the multidisciplinary research approach, which most of us probably is engaging in. Is experts from different disciplines bring along their own theories and frameworks and methodologies and put together a big project. So basically, the integration is the skills and the ideas, but a higher level of integration or collaboration is what we try to achieve most of the time. It's the interdisciplinary approach, which is the experts from different disciplines come together and try to come up with a common framework, borrow from all the different disciplines' framework and thinking and ideas and methodology, and put together in a research agenda. So this is more integrated interdisciplinary research. The highest level of integration or collaboration is a transdisciplinary research. It also, other than integrating, or collaboration among academic stakeholders, we also involve people that are non-academics, such as the policymaker, the one who decide how much funding, whether to translate the research finding into policy, and those who are in the front line will be getting involved in the research as well. So as this is the highest level, so it's more an ideal more than reality. So most of us are conducting research with other departments or disciplines more on the multidisciplinary approach or the interdisciplinary approach. Then, if we look at the types of research that from different disciplines that we work in, we can roughly separate it in two types. One is more academic focused, or we call it the basic research type, and the other one is more the problem-focused type. So if we look at the level of integration on this dimension, the multidisciplinary is slightly lower level of integration than the interdisciplinary research that we talked about before. And then contribution to development of discipline and if we look at this dimension, the multidisciplinary approach would be focusing on contribution to development of discipline. I think this one should be moved down here. Okay, let me do it this quickly so that not to mislead, can't do it. Okay. Anyway, so if we are talking of the multidisciplinary research, if it's focusing on problem focus, it will contribute more on the practical problem solving. If the interdisciplinary research, it can be both problem focused and academic focused. Okay, so in a nutshell, the best way is to try to be interdisciplinary rather than each discipline bring along their own discipline approach, ideas and methodology and hypotheses and questions and agenda. So this is our strive towards interdisciplinary research, but in reality, it's very hard to distinguish the two. Okay, so another question to ask: why is it so important to do interdisciplinary research? we all know that social problems or any problem is multi-factor, okay? One single perspective is not going to explain a whole lot. It requires so from an interdisciplinary approach, we can look at the issues or the problems from different angles. And it has more impact as it reaches a wider audience than a single discipline. And sometimes, and for specific funding, it's more appealing to international funding and publication. But this is a double-edged sword. It's a plus, but again, later on we talk about it's also an obstacle to people not doing interdisciplinary research. So, and the interdisciplinary research brings up together collaborations from different disciplines and open up new perspective. As we go along, we know that interdisciplinary research needs a lot of meetings and discussions. As we talk, as we discuss, then new ideas and new perspective will come up. So it is like more like a brainwash, exercise, and move researchers out of their territorial comfort zones. Okay, and then there are potential obstacles, and these obstacles are really real. Okay. So, for example, the internal obstacle, scientific presentation, publication, could get the credit. Okay, and RAE, okay, the first author got one, the second author a certain weightage, or the corresponding authors get a certain weightage. So the problem is if you're from different disciplines, the authorship, okay, how do you arrange that? Who gets the credit? If you got funding, it's very true for me too, because if you got funding for interdisciplinary research, where does it park? Okay, the best way if you have a center, then you park at the center. But if it's a project involves various disciplines, who will be the PI and the funding will park in which department? And which department will be responsible for hiring and doing the budgeting that nobody wants to do, all the reimbursement and things like that. And the next thing is an intellectual property. So who owns the research? Okay, so you can say that team, but then people will always say that which of the team member owns. That means which discipline, okay? In a nutshell, that the one who are the PI will probably, assign the intellectual property issues. Okay. So, and then interdepartment interactions is not always smooth, okay? So we have experience of the process of reimbursement for conference attendance. It's so different, department from department. And who or what group gets the credit for the grant and working with another institution. Sometimes interdisciplinary research also involves other institutions. For example, there's an area, a discipline that is not available. For example, if you're working on mental health issues and your institution does not have a medical school, then you have to collaborate. You might have to think about collaboration with another institution. Now, the external obstacle is really real, okay? So requires new appreciation, but it's getting better and better now. Okay, one thing, I don't go down point by point. One thing is what at one point in my career, academic career, since the second year I've been on the hiring team. I don't know why. So I've been hiring for 28 years. Soliciting external review, internal review, etc., etc. So when I was in Singapore, we had this particular collaborator which is very interdisciplinary in the digital thing. So she's working on virtual reality and everything. So when we were trying to recruit this person, we have to select 10 or something, external reviews. And we had difficulty in getting reviewers because people say, well, I'm not in that team, exactly in that team. And then another person that, this is not my expert area, although I touch on part of it. So I'm not in a particular, and the paper that this particular person published is not the journal that I'm familiar with. And this thing happens the first 2 years I came to Singapore, and it happens last year when we were trying to recruit a full professor, which is interdisciplinary. So when you are interdisciplinary, it's very difficult to position yourself. Okay, where are you? Are you in psychology or linguistics or in mass communication or in medical school or in psychiatry? And the other thing is really killing us is if you look at the impact factor thing. multidisciplinary journal typically to be a very low impact factor. Okay, so the single discipline, journals always have higher impact than multidisciplinary. So, for example, I have gender issues, a typical interdisciplinary, product. Okay, people from different disciplines work together on a gender issue. Journals on gender issues are typically very low. One impact factor 1.5 is the top journal in my days. Okay, and sometimes it goes to 0.9, something like that. But if you work on gender issue, but then you put it in a specific single journal, for example, in psychology, you could end up in an impact factor journal like 2.3 or 3 point something. So it's really killing us that when we're doing interdisciplinary research, at the end of the day, okay, it's very sad. So in order to overcome this obstacle, each discipline takes their part out of the interdisciplinary research and write with their own discipline approach, focus, and then submit to their own discipline journal and get a high impact factor. So that's very real. So in terms of the journal, your individual academic career in the past is really killing. But nowadays, when everybody is moving towards more interdisciplinary, things start to get a little bit better. But journal impact factors takes time to build up. So it's not quite seen in the impact factor for journals. So that's something that we have to, working, towards. Nowadays, people talk, the funding aspect is much better now. Actually, there are specific funding for cross-discipline, cross-faculty. For some big university, they have special funding for cross-faculty, for cross-department, cross-institution. I had a colleague in HKSYU just this year get a big, large grant for what they call cross-institutional research. Okay, so that's the funding is moving towards interdisciplinary. Okay, so that's better. But in terms of for the individual team members, we have to think very hard. Okay, how to overcome these obstacles. But it has plus and minus. Okay, if you are interdisciplinary, your research gets much wider audience and gets more publicity, and the impact is much wider than your own discipline. Okay, so factors influencing success of interdisciplinary research is a very new article summarized. And in order to conduct interdisciplinary research, you have to be a T-shaped researcher. What is a T-shaped researcher? Breadth and depth. Okay, so you in a discipline, in your own discipline, you need your depth, and in your discipline, related discipline, you need breadth. Okay, so in a strong interdisciplinary team, we need researchers with breadth and depth of knowledge, people with worldview. And so if we go to the T-shaped research, so to make a successful interdisciplinary research team, we have to have T-shaped researchers. Of course, we have to have institutional support. Time and time again, later on, we'll talk about if we really want to promote interdisciplinary research, the institutional support is very, very important. Because in an interdisciplinary, every discipline is on equal footage. Who is the big brother? Who is the big sister? Who is calling the shot? Okay, the university will be the one who assign, who is the team leader, who is the center director, and things like that. Okay, so because interdisciplinary, we assume everyone is on an equal footing. Each discipline is equally important. So we need a higher authority, higher figure to do the infrastructure and to put in the initial funding and to put in the usual running costs. For example, in a center, you can't be. Now our center at NUS, we got lots of funding, but we're still struggling with the administrative costs. Because regardless, if you're not doing anything, you still need a full-time personnel to manage, manager to manage the center. And where does that money come from? Research grants do not budget for this type of administrative support. So that's the institutional support. They have to find money from somewhere to support this center in terms of later on, we talk about space, basic space, basic infrastructure. Okay, I look at your research center at the 3rd floor. It's very nice, you know. So we have, if you're familiar with Chinese University of Hong Kong, we have the Asian Pacific Institute, they call it Research Institute. Each program just has one room. We just have one room, a standard office size. Okay, so we need institutional support, and then we also need shared vision and collective dialogue. We need a lot of discussion. We need to have, later on there's a diagram showing that in certain way, individual researcher has to sacrifice something in order to be part of the team. Their mission, their ambition is not for individual, it's for the team. Okay, so we have a shared vision as where the team should go and where does the agenda, where are the agenda for this year and what are the 5 or 3 year plan and things like that. It must be a shared vision. Okay, so this is something that Islam said it will make success of individual research. Perhaps we look at individual factors or dimensions a little bit more detail. So if we go down to the team, it includes individual persons, okay? Interpersonal factors that make the team successful is group center orientation. It's not individual center. So it's not this ground where we have my P&T, things like that, okay? So we have to think big, you know, with interdisciplinary research, we have to think big, okay? So an ability to establish a common language, mutual respect. So in this way, the junior faculty will ask, then I should not be in a team, because you said I have to give up some of my time to do something that might not add much to my individual portfolio. But I will counteract that, okay? Be part of a team, then you build up your foundation. Later on, you learn from working in a team, then you learn from others how to think big, how to propose big proposals, and how to, you know, become a leader and how to work as a team. So it's a good experience for junior faculty to learn, but not to lead, okay? So sometimes, you know, it happens to some of our faculties, especially young aspiring faculty, young junior faculty member. I have brilliant projects that worth millions of dollars, and I call up different people, and then I'll be the team leader, okay? But then the thing is that one look at the funder, one look at it, it has no credibility, and but they still could find money. And then the next thing comes is because he's junior, nobody listened to him, so it ended up become a single discipline project. So my suggestion to junior faculty colleagues, you know, it would be nice to join an interdisciplinary research team as a team member, but it would not be your main portfolio, okay? You still need a single discipline as your research, as your major portfolio. But my strong advice for those who are from associate to struggle to a full professor or assistant to full professor, is good to be on an interdisciplinary team and to try to slowly become a team leader, okay? Because I was always asking to review people on promotion from these 2 levels, okay? So what we look for an associate professor, quality to promote a full professor, is the ability to lead an interdisciplinary team. Nowadays, it's almost a criteria written into the assessment. So it's no point if they're doing single author, single discipline, it makes lots of grants, but the impact is only within the department, with the discipline. So what we are looking at is also a little bit more nowadays for assessment. It's true for UK assessment, American assessment, and Australian assessment. So I don't think Singapore or Hong Kong is any different when we're promoting full professors. So this is something that for assistant, associate professors also to think about. You don't become the leaders in one day. So you join a team and be the middle level, okay? So it's a layer, okay? So an ideal team or interdisciplinary not only consists of different disciplines, but it consists of faculty from different levels so that they can learn from each other. And the opportunity, the benefit for each level is different, okay? So it's group center, so it's towards the team, and intellectual, conceptual foundation of your own language, especially a general appreciation of what other disciplines is doing and what are their approaches. And of course, the contextual level, again, is the institutional support structure, availability of external funding, and adequate career opportunities. So nowadays, we specify for promotion to full professors that we need to, for assistant, associate, then we need to see the potential to become a leader. But from associate to a full professor, we're looking for someone who are already, or on the verge of be a leader, or who are starting to be a leader. So this is almost written into, our assessment, from, if we call requests from other universities for, this type of assessment for promotion. These are the criteria some of the universities set out for us to assess. So this is so important that the infrastructure in building these interdisciplinary research centers or institutes or clusters, you build in the academic career for these faculties as well. So, so these are the factors. And attributes and skills, okay, so it's slightly different for individual researcher and for research manager or team leaders. So for individual, you must know the thing well. If it's an interdisciplinary EBP research, you must yourself be comfortable with what is EBP, and you also must yourself believe in EBP does work, and EBP is important, okay? If we are skeptical about it, then you can't do good research on EBP. Okay, understand the language, research methods, and culture of different disciplines is very important. I think with sociology, I had this experience. When we come up with a scale, we have a question to ask. Psychology always has 30, 40, 50 items to ask. And sociology, social work colleagues, what did you do so many items? Why don't you just ask one question? Do you want to go to bed to work? Or do you intend to take drugs, or do you? So just one, be concise. But psychologists want to go to abstract, moving around, things like that. So we have to compromise. Okay, we have to talk about what's the best approach, and we also talk about surveys. What is the best methodology? Is it really do we do randomized controlled trial to test our hypothesis, to test our EBP, or do we do a household survey or other things? So we have to be understanding each discipline's research methodology and in-depth interviews and things like that. And high tolerance on ambiguity and personality within the team members is very important. Okay, find someone who you think can work with. Okay, and clear understanding of your own roles and responsibilities. Willingness to learn from other disciplines, okay? So it's always good when we were looking for members in the team or starter members or finding new members, we kind of informally ask the other members, how do you feel about asking this person to come in? And sometimes I will very politely say that, if you want my life to be easy, please don't. So things like that, okay? So you got feedback from your team members, okay? So research team manager, they also, of course you have the base administrative managerial skill. I like this skill, not too ambitious in their own field. Okay, I always, center directors and whatever, you have to sacrifice things and arranging things for other people, but at the end of the day, you got nothing. Okay, you don't get time off. Yeah, I don't know here. As a center director or co-director or whatever director, you still carry the same teaching load, unless you write pages and pages of justification. You bring in millions of dollars, then they may give you a half teaching load off. But still, your half teaching load off is to managing the admin staff, and then to call the meetings and arrange things that have no concrete output. And the time is being spent, and negotiates. And sometimes, if we do interdisciplinary research, we know that people don't get along too well, and we have to talk to individual members individually. So the team members should be the one who are very comfortable with the career stage. Okay, so basically, you're very comfortable in your career stage, and you're not too ambitious. You're already a professor. You don't want to be distinguished professor, chair professor. You're just happy with professor. That's a perfect place for you to be in. So this is something that will make interdisciplinary EBP research work. Now back to, this is the backbone. So you're forming the team. So what is the interdisciplinary research team doing? There are two basic types of interdisciplinary research in EBP. First, I think when we do EBP, we also talk about you either expand the current knowledge, or from the current language, you develop new theoretical framework and new knowledge. So of course, when you expand, it's becoming new knowledge also. But it's slightly different. The two approach. Expand is you start with current knowledge and try to find the gaps and then fill in the gaps. And building a new theoretical is to put all together the current knowledge and see if you come up with a new framework. Okay, so there's two basic approach. Again, it's the repeat of what I just said. So it has to, building the interdisciplinary research team, you have to have the organization structure. You have to have organizational resources support for a research environment. And the most important is create critical mass. You find your critical mass. Okay, how do you find? I don't know. Okay, usually what we do is we call, when it's time for grant proposals, grant submission time, we ask people around, this is the project, are you interested in things like that? But perhaps we can be more systematic. In some institutions, they have monthly or bi-monthly in university-wide seminars, so that all disciplines will come to this type of seminars. And then those who come, of course, will be interested in that topic. And there's time together for people to talk about the ideas in a common topic. So we have to create a critical mass and create the atmosphere for interdisciplinary research. Get funding or collaborative grants. Another thing is we don't know which one is chicken, which one is the egg. Recruit full-time research personnel, postdoc or research assistant. Okay, the ideal thing is that for organization, for structure support is you give space for a center or a cluster, and then you give no matter how much money, small money or big money. For some administrative support, maybe quarter time, secretary, and then some research assistant support, maybe half a research assistant. That's before you get any research grant coming in. So, and this is the running course, so to speak. Yeah, because some of these things, groundwork, you can't expect the faculty to run around doing some of the groundwork in the evidence-based stage where you cannot put to, finding all the evidence. So the ideal is to have a institutional support for running course. It might not be full-time for everybody, maybe sharing between clusters. So research assistant, research personnel, and for big university, they have postdocs. And research clusters are good nurturing ground for postdoc when the grant comes in. Okay, so and acquire mechanism, and that's another thing, mechanism of retrieving and storing research documents and database. Okay, so doing interdisciplinary research, we have to have a lot of database. for us to be working. And some of the database for single discipline, they might not require it. But if you're doing interdiscipline, you might require that kind of database. And documents, in the past it's journal papers, now we don't have to storage for database. But later on, when there's research project coming in, you also need to find the physical space for all these documents, okay? Build infrastructure, all this admin staff, grant management, regulatory, identify. So the next thing is when we have all this infrastructure, so ideally this will be in place, okay? Then we start to come up, identify specific EBP research topics agenda, recruit missing ingredients, researcher in specific discipline, have frequent meetings to discuss results, and elect a strong leader. And sometimes, usually, the most effective thing is for the university to appoint, because no one wants to do it. If you ask me, I don't want to do it. Yeah. Although I'm not too ambitious, but my time is well spent with working on my own, in front of my own computer, in front of my own project, rather than dealing with all these other things. So usually people do not want it, okay? And usually people who really want it may not be the best person. So that's the issue. So now getting into that, okay? So we now get into how to start interdisciplinary research, EBP research. There's many ways to start. We can brainstorm, call a meeting, or we hope, this is one thing that we got support from the university, give very small amounts of money for us to set up a conference just for travel, for researchers from overseas to travel. I think there's similar grants, because I talked to some of the colleagues, they're eager they have money to spend to invite people to come in. Okay, so this conference not to present papers, but to talk about ideas, okay? Very small amounts of money. So at first we invite renowned speakers from North America and Canada, but the money the institution gives to us is not even enough for one business class, plus per diem, plus allowance for one renowned researcher from the Western world. So I said, well, since our topic, probably we start with Asia, can we use the money to invite 6 Asian attendants, collaborators? And we did, and with money left behind, we still have more than enough money. So this is a conference just to talk about, at that time we talk about addiction, behavioral addiction, and that's where my presentation on the 7 countries come out. So it was funded by a discussion, conference. So they call it workshops, okay? Very small money from the institute, and our collaborators, they also chip in themselves a little bit, and then we talk about ideas, bring about ideas, and then we each go back. So this is a way to talk about forming interdisciplinary research, and that's what I also do with when I was with the gender studies program, gender research program in HKSYU. I remember we talked in 1994. We talked about gender and mobility. I could never think about I would bring in geographer. There's a human geographer. They specifically talk about mobility. And there are very renowned collaborators in Australia doing gender issues in mobility across, and then a collaborator in Singapore at that time. So that's a really eye-opening type of seminars with not too much money. Okay, bye. I know you have another seminars.
Yeah,
okay.
I've got another.
Okay, nothing to do with my talk. Okay, okay. So it's not my talk, not interesting. So now back to the main thing. Now phases of interdisciplinary research. So basically, this phases, okay, very detailed. So the PowerPoint will be up. I won't read point by point, although I have time. But I want to really go into next few stages, mapping the EBP model to interdisciplinary research framework. January talked to me, how does it relate to interdisciplinary research? Yes, it did. When we do interdisciplinary research, We can do interdisciplinary research on any topic, or we can do interdisciplinary research on EBP. No matter what you do with the interdisciplinary research, you still can use the EBP model. The model includes 5 very simple steps. I introduced about 15 models, but this is the models that most disciplines will understand, will agree that when we do research, we have to first ask the question, assess what's available, and then appraise what is missing, what we can do, and apply our, whatever we talk about, applying to put it in the research program or intervention program, and then you conduct it, and then you evaluate the outcome of your research or your intervention. So if we map this EBP model into the interdisciplinary research framework, ask is the research objective, the research theories, what is the theory, what is the construct, what's the topic that you want to do, okay? When you ask, we are not just philosophers, we're not like thinkers, just sit there and think. We have to assess to all best evidence, okay? We have to look at the evidence and look at the literature, what has been done and what has not been done, and what is the gap. Okay, so that's assess, and we talk about different evidence at different weights. Okay, like meta-analysis give us the most important, overview of a lot of information on the topic. So we assess the evidence that we collected, and then we appraise the evidence, and then put together with the strength, the conceptual framework, and methodology from different disciplines, and put together in either a research conceptual framework or an intervention framework. Okay, so we have the design, come up with the interdisciplinary research design or framework, and then we apply it, either conduct the research, evidence. Now we are conducting the evidence-based research. Okay. And either it's a conceptual research question or it's an intervention, outcome research question. And then we assess and then report and disseminate our result. So if we go to each step, the first is the ask, okay? To review and integrate interdisciplinary perspective knowledge to create new conceptual framework, or to build on existing framework and see what is missing. Appraise is to review and synthesize evidence from different disciplines, example, conducting critical review, meta-analysis, and descriptive review. And to apply is to integrate interdisciplinary intervention approaches or framework and formulate a comprehensive and interdisciplinary practice or intervention program or conceptual framework. Wherever it is, either you can do a research conceptual framework or you can do an intervention. And assess is to evaluate the effectiveness, efficacy of the interdisciplinary practice model or the research question, the sample program, evaluation, cost-effective analysis. Okay, let me have some water first. The first step is to ask, what are we going to do? Okay, we got the money, we got a seed grant, what are we going to do? Okay, identify issue. If you remember the second series, we talked about translating, the conceptual EBP framework into research or into practice. It's the PICO framework. Patient, I forgot what is I. PI code. My memory is so short-term nowadays. Okay, so you can use the PI framework. Joseph, can you remind me of PICO? Intervention, comparison, and outcome. Okay, so in the second lecture we talk about patient career. That means the question itself. Okay, what do you want to do? The intervention, what has been done? Okay, what do you want to do? Okay, and what do you want to ask if it's a research question? Comparison. Any research team has asked similar questions before, or has they used a different approach to treat this disorder before? So your own research framework, and then when we conduct, nowadays when we do research, we have a hypothesis. But we also always conduct, we always also ask, is there possible alternate hypothesis as well that can be also possible? So other than the ones we strongly propose, maybe there's an alternate hypothesis that is possible. So nowadays we always say that other than your own hypothesis or your own framework, can there be another alternate framework? So that's the comparison. Outcome, you conduct the study, you do the modeling of two conceptual framework, which one is the best model? If you conduct two intervention programs, the one you design and the one who is found to be useful, that is being used nowadays, if you compare which one is more effective, okay? So you can use the PICO framework of the EBP to ask your interdisciplinary EBP research, identify how the problem issue was discussed by previous research, find possibilities in dealing the issue by reading across other disciplines. Discuss with scholars of other disciplines, formalize with so you familiarize with other framework and read journal articles of interdisciplinary nature and consider new perspective. So that's the ask stage. And I would say that as a thesis student approach me, my approach is ask is the most important stage and it's the most confusing stage. So students come to me for thesis, they're always very, very, very confused. Because it's unlike other approach from other teachers, they're already projects and they take a part of it. So ask stage is that it's very important and it takes a long time. If you ask the right question, if you ask a useful question, insightful question, and you move along much smoothly. Even your result does not support your question, it still is the finding, okay? So when you ask a question, you can draw on disciplinary insight, or you can integrate the insight to come up with new insight. That's the two approach that we're talking about, okay? All right, so let's give some example of asking. For example, I had a burning question to ask is I want to understand, and I have some money from somewhere already, try to understand the public's response to extreme violence from an interdisciplinary approach. Okay, I want to, so it is true. There's money floating around, particularly in Southeast Asia. They talk about terrorism because it's this is an issue they want to. We don't want to put it in terrorism. It's too terrifying. So we put it into extreme violence. Okay. So from an interdisciplinary approach, because extreme violence is not. So we approach it in three different. This is an example. We try to look at how to understand, how to get knowledge and get information from people's response. So we can get people's individual response from psychology perspective. How do individual people respond to extreme violence? And we can also, from a political science, from a community perspective, that's a larger society, how do a certain society or a certain culture or certain political think about extreme violence. So from a political science perspective, or we can also from a historical perspective, how do people respond to extreme violence? And you may be amazed, historically, some point in our time we embrace extreme violence. Okay, particularly when we were in the haltering culture, back in the old days, hunting-gathering society. Okay, this is the way to get your territory, extreme violence. So we can get people's understanding of response to extreme violence from different interdisciplinary, from psychology, political science, history. It's just an example. You can, any that you can think about. And then with all this information, ask, appraise, get all the evidence, do all the evidence, you have to think about, and then come up with, see whether psychology has their own conceptual framework of understanding individual response, For psychology, I know a little bit better. We always argue that people's response to violence is different, and there are certain factors influencing how you respond. Personality, whether you're stressful, and whether you're mentally healthy, and whether you have good social support, etc., etc. So we have frameworks about understand how individual responds to extreme violence. And political science, they have their own conceptual framework. Okay, and perhaps sociology, I miss out sociology. Okay, yeah. So history. So with all these framework, we come up multiple representation of terrorism, and modeling approach. We come up with a new approach, and then from that approach, we identify mediating factors. Okay, how are some of the factors that from this new approach, from different perspectives, will influence people's response to extreme violence. Okay, this is an example. So we come up with a new model, and then we come up with some mediated, hypothesized mediated concepts. Okay, that's another example. This is one that's been talking about a lot in Singapore, because obesity is #1 health problem. I don't see the particular fact, but they identified in 2018 obesity, particularly in school-age children, is the #1 health hassle. Okay, and they felt like, since adults are not listening to anyone, so they think the best approach is to, if you start from young, developing a good habit, and you know about health conscious, developing a good health status and health living lifestyle, then you can carry on to your adulthood. So they want huge funding, okay, of investigating factors. So this is not so much an intervention, okay, it's a research question, okay. Just want to know what factors related to child obesity, with the ultimate aim that understanding these factors, then later on, we will design for an interdisciplinary health promotion program to reduce obesity in teenagers. Now, that's a strategy for funding for this type of thing. Don't put everything together in one proposal. Okay, it's just that you shift the reviewers, different reviewers into different focus. Some reviewers will focus on your factors, and some reviewers will focus on intervention. And then you come up with the 3.2 and gets nowhere in your funding. So the strategy is to cut it, okay, but you tell them what you're going to do. Okay, first approach is to identify the factors, come up with a model, and then perhaps do some small pilot thing, and then tell tell whatever the application that with the aim that this will be used for interdisciplinary health promotion program to reduce obesity in teenagers. So with all this, okay, so that's why I said, even coming for a proposal, coming for ask question, you need some basic research personnel to support you. Okay, of course, each discipline will go back and then find their own thing, but then we still need someone to integrate all this. So that's why there will be some running course or some research personnel time in the center that's not related to any particular project, but to prepare for either all this grant proposal and all this thing. Okay, so with all this, we know that health status is related to your living conditions, behavioral lifestyle. And all these other factors is related to living condition. So we go, the government policy, national and local policy influence people's, living style. And information mass media. And at one point, Singapore, when I first go to Singapore, this tape goes there, then they always publicize upsizing. You pay $5, you can upsize 1/3 more. Okay, so instead of 1 liter of Coke, you have 1.3 liter of Coke. So all this promotion, then you drink all you drink all. So this is information market media, and now and then it's all those drink machine, soft drink machine, snack machine all over the schoolyard, and then And now there's, I think there's a ban on this machine on school, school buildings, things, etc. Okay, and education, employment status, personal characteristic, affordable primary health care. If you got sick, is it easy to seek help? Okay, and is it expensive and things like that. And I heard, I saw TV now. I think it's a good practice that the health authorities go to individual school to have the school children, vaccinated against flu. Okay, rather than you give them coupon and then you go to private doctors. And then they found the utilization increased from 50% to 80% of the vaccination. And then there's a call to put this school-based vaccination to kindergarten. I think it's a good idea because kindergarten is a high-risk group. Okay, and if you go to there, then the mothers will not need to take the time off to bring the kids to vaccinate in a private practitioner. Okay, so with all this in mind, who is the interdisciplinary research in asking this question, and who will be working together on this project? You can count all this. Of course, not all are interested. The potential collaborators will be marketing and advertising, the communication, the journalism communication, education. If it's a school-based, it must include the education colleagues, social work, psychology, sociology, food and nutrition, pediatrics, family medicine, public health medicine. And look who is most interested in this type of program nowadays? The public health colleagues. They take the lead. Okay, because they're good at doing all these things. And they call on all those. Now, discipline includes what is missing? What is missing? This is a very important discipline that almost all projects, this type of project, intervention project will call on eventually. For this type is the health economist. The economic person goes away. Okay, health economists. If I do this, okay, if I had your research question, identify all the factors. Eventually, you come up with a suggestion for a program. How much will it cost? And what if I don't do this program? What would it cost without doing this program? How does it compare to the health cost before this type of program? Because child obesity is very dangerous because they will develop diabetes, they will be prone to accident, and there will be teeth decay and health problem and blah, 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 all those kind of things. So usually for this type of program now, we always have a health economist. And for psychology, we also include an economist to see, if it's a mental health intervention program, it's still a health economist. So what if we don't deliver this program, intervention program to this group of mental health patients and just give them drug treatment? Will it be more expensive or will it be more cheaper? Nowadays it's called, dollar is very important. So in this type of, particularly if you're going to be a territory-wide, program, the health economist will be called upon to calculate the dollar sign. How much can the government save and how much will it cost? All right? So that's one example. Now, in doing this is how we look at how we divide the job. Okay, the primary researcher will be best available for research evidence. Will be doing the systematic review. The practitioner, they always will, if it's involved in intervention program, or even if they don't involve in intervention program, for example, if it's a child obesity program, the pediatrician will tell us, the family doctor will tell us, these obese children, what problems they've come up with. So we kind of know what's the outcome and how to, what we eventually want to prevent. And then, of course, the kind and population characteristic, the culture and preference. Do you want, if we are going to deliver a health promotion program, do you want to be, do the parents want to get involved? Do we deliver on Saturday, Sunday with the parents? If you ask the parents, no, during the school time. And for school, the teacher will say, we have too much curriculum, no time slot in, things like that, okay? So you have to ask your client, your stakeholder, and then you also see how much resources that you have, right? So now we have asked the question just now, then we come up, the person sit together, come up with this framework. They finally agree that we use an ecological framework. We all know the ecological framework. That the problem is you have the individual level, the family, the community, and the larger circle. Okay, so this is a framework most of the social science and the health colleagues will agree that this is a good framework to work with. If that's the case, so we decide use this common framework for this different discipline, and then come up, identify different factors within this framework, and then we calculate. Then we ask who is still interested. Then we communication, marketing, education, social work, psychology, sociology, food, nutrition, pediatrician, and public health. And usually you can't manage if they all agree. 4 or 5 is more than enough. Okay, so usually the medical colleague would be just the public health, and pediatricians, sometimes they might be interested, and sociology, psychology, social work, either 2 of them. The 3 of them don't usually work together. All 3 work together. Usually just the 2 out of the 3 work together. Okay, and the education, if we decide to be a school-based. Now, if we look at this framework, and the individual factor. So we identify what are some of the factors to work with in eventually deciding an evidence-based program. So we've identified individually the person's condition, expectancy, attitude, skills and behavior, lifestyle, the genes, the gender and age group, demographics, income of the family, and all these self-efficacy, all these will be individual factors that's useful to be put together somehow to be in this interdisciplinary evidence-based program to reduce evidence. So basically, this will probably, psychology colleagues will be most interested in working here, and social environment, friends, families, peers, and social support, social norms, sociology colleague and social work colleague would probably be more interested, focus on this one. And then the physical environment, I think sociology, social work, and probably psychology are less focused on this aspect, homework, stress, school, after school, childcare, all these things. And then probably the macro environment, societal, cultural norms and values, the Chinese norms, children, it's nice to be fat, cute. If you're fat, it's cute. So it's always the more high tolerance for fat child than skinny child. Okay, so the food and beverage industry. Okay, so the marketing, food marketing. I had a colleague talking about this. It's a single discipline research. They try to do the decision making with a virtual program, app program to the kids. Okay, it's an experimental study. Okay, they try to design a virtual supermarket and give each kid, $50. Okay, so this $50 that we give to you, what would you buy? Okay, and they give them different health messages. Say, Coca-Cola is not good for your health, good enough for teeth, and see whether this is affect their choice of e-shopping. So it's very interesting, but it's a single study. So the focus is on, they did a serious study on similar thing. I remember one study is that whether you put the price on top and discount at the below, people pay more notice, or you pay the discount price at the top of the regular price, people pay more attention to. Which one people pay more attention to if you put the discount price down there? whether discount price, whether you actually discount one bottle of Coca-Cola, or you discount for buying 2 bottles. It's more, if people are more likely to buy. So they're looking at those behavior. Okay, so these are the things that individual discipline will be interested in. So if we're working on a multidisciplinary approach or interdisciplinary approach, our focus will be more than just that aspect. Okay, so these are the aspects: food and industry, economic system, food production, government and political structure and policy. I think South Korea also had a child obesity problem. They start to ban, all those soda drinks in primary school, I think since last year or even earlier. So there are government policy and food, assistance, health system, land use, and transportation. Okay, so this is how different disciplines come up with a common agreed conceptual framework. So this is what we said, building on an existing framework, and then add on the factors to explore an issue, rather than coming up with a new framework. Okay. Now, again, then we have to evaluate. Okay, after we apply, conduct the research, or conduct the intervention program, we have to evaluate. So the discipline that's involved. So the evaluation, okay, sometimes actually is the best to be evaluated by not the same team. Okay, so usually I did community projects, and usually we are asked to just evaluate an intervention program. Somebody else conduct the intervention. So in the thinking that it need to be objective. So if you're not involved in the application and the conceptual framework, and you will be thinking that you'll be a more objective evaluator. So the evaluation discipline might not be the same discipline, okay? And your evaluation will be according to, like I said, short-term, immediate outcome, and long-term outcome when we talk about evaluation before. So you have to lay down when you are evaluating what is the immediate short-term effect. You won't see when the intervention starts, you deliver intervention, you don't immediately see the obesity drop immediately. But your short-term goal will probably they are less likely to buy soft drinks or soda drinks. They're more likely to exercise, and they have developed a more healthy eating style. And then in the long term, you go back a year or 2 years later and to find out, or a longitudinal study, or you go back to evaluate these people again. So the long-term outcome is increased proportion of students with healthy weight range. So eventually, hopefully, their body weight will be about average rather than overweight. Okay. Now, so much about, I still have enough to go. So all this is how we come up with the project and interdisciplinary project, how we conduct it, how we evaluate. And all this is not possible without some institutional support and some infrastructure to integrate and to manage all this. Okay. Of course, it can be done informally, but if you want to be more effective, then we strongly suggest formation research institutes and clusters. And in almost all universities, you have research institutes and clusters. So institution-wise, they understand the importance. But, okay, so let's look at, research institutes, the largest of the entities with more resources invested in activities than consortium or centers. The activity should be extensive in scale. Research institutes is very big, okay? And research consortium is also very big. So most of the time, we will have research centers, okay? And most research centers started with research clusters. But I would say that perhaps our experience, when you form research clusters, when there's very minimal support, people starting talking informally, and it's very difficult to group them into research centers. Okay, so our strategy is to forget about research cluster, to start with research centers. Okay, if you want to do interdisciplinary, you form centers rather than clusters. And research centers to have an identifiable focus, like a center for evidence-based research, center for social studies, and center for digital health nowadays, or eye health. So have an identified focus, have an ongoing funding for running course, for admin support, and some part-time research support. Have funding including multiple grants and not a single grant. Engage multiple faculty and graduate students. Research center is a good place for postdoc training. So in a way that, and you share the cost of a postdoc, having a postdoc is so expensive, okay? And if you had a postdoc station in a research center, they can involve in more than one research project, and have some clearly identified rationale for being established, okay? And this is probably, a typical structure for a research center. You have a steering committee, okay, and a center director, an independent review committee. A steering committee can be, part leader, and if you have, when your center gets big, you have more projects, so you need a few members to take on, some of the administrative, management. So you have a steering committee, and very important, you have the independent review panel to review periodically what the center is doing. And typically, this review panel report directly to the university, to the provost or whoever is responsible for research, to see how the center is running, whether to continue the support. It's not usual for a center to close down. I've seen center closing down, and so if it's a center director, we have several project leader and different projects. So this is a typical, and don't forget about the individual and particular overseas review panel. The voice is usually very, they usually are our voice, for to speak for ourselves to the university as to what our accomplishment and what our shortfalls and what are some of the recommendations. So this is something. Of course, I said careful manage selection team members, the leaders, those who very eagerly become the leaders. I think we will have second thoughts about that. Okay, and team members, clarification, roles, expectation, regular communication, regular meetings, develop relations, trust, effective team functions. Okay, so again, just to repeat some of the things that we have said, the team leader attribute, steering committee, individual team members, project manager. So I won't go into detail, and I think I'm starting losing my voice. So perhaps, okay, I take it up from University of Florida. Efforts to enhance and promote interdisciplinarity in higher education. I think it's good for us to take this and not just to put on our website, but to make sure that we will be working towards this goal, fostering a collaborative interdisciplinary culture on campus and institutions, centers, workshops, speakers. So it's not easy because, like I said, if it's a teamwork, who get the credit? How much does it add onto my portfolio? Okay, so so we need to develop a culture and spirit of working together for the common good, to have bigger impact for our research question, for our research project, as well for policy implication. And hopefully the institution provides some seed funding and regular running costs to maintain the center and to keep the center running for a few more years, okay? We were given some money for 3 years to start our center for demography and family studies. 3 years have passed and we still have money left, and we're allowed to use the money. But we are going into a crisis that we're asked to be self-funded. But no way it can be self-funded, because no funding is going to fund all these running costs. They fund the project itself, okay? And each personnel is just working on that project, okay? So that's the problem. So where does the money come from, okay, to fund the running costs? Increasing joint appointments and cluster hires across college, focus on specific issue areas. And particularly, I think we need to kind of refine our promotion and tenure or whatever, promotion, hiring, reviewing committee for faculty to promote, to put more emphasis, at least, if not put emphasis, at least, you know, give credit for faculties who are active in interdisciplinary, you know, research as well. So making the tenure promotion process more receptive to interdisciplinary scholarship. Okay, so this is the last slide that I have. So these are the 3 lecture series or seminar series that I have delivered in the span of 1.5 months, over 2 years. Cannot laugh. Okay, so perhaps time for sharing. Okay, so